I just wanted to clarify something, because I think, with the best intentions, I think you're confusing two things. Because yes, there is firstly making sure that out of school and alternative provision is properly regulated and ensuring that children are not radicalised or subjected to unequal propaganda, etc. And then there is out of school activities and settings, which can easily go over that 6 to 8 hours, which on our last time that you were here, I asked you some questions and you said there's a very sharp divide and we should be looking at main education. Now, there is no way that 8 hours can classify as main education, so it seems like you've done a bit of a backflip in a sense, because that would qualify children that were doing swimming lessons every day, it would qualify those that were going to any kind of clubs every day, it would qualify those that were in a religious class every day, which can be in the Christian faith as well as the Muslim and Jewish. So do you not think that that is completely overreaching the mark of your job?
I think I wrote to you to clarify after the session, but what I would like is to get to it, is for the work to be done to get to a working definition that broadly doesn't capture beyond the basic safeguarding requirements, the sort of the sporting clubs and the various kinds of things that are clearly not likely to fall in scope of concerns about education or sort of radicalisation practices. That is a matter for the various bits of government to work on. I'm not trying to sort of draft legislation on the hoof, but simply to say...
So are you saying it would just be religious organisations and education organisations? Is that what you're saying? But sporting would be out of the area because you can't influence a child in one setting but you can in another? It doesn't seem to add up.
The difficulty is that something can be presented as being primarily about something that is actually about something else. We have mixed organisations. Many religious communities have youth organisations which are partly about sport, which are partly about culture, which are partly about education. So I don't want to try myself to define here a specific purpose. But what I'm being clear about is that the intention that should exist is to have enough information to be able to identify where there is potential risk to children and to make sure that any inspection effort is directed in the right places.
So you're admitting it would be extremely hard to figure out who should be inspected, what the qualification point should be, and because some areas are so blurred. So wouldn't it almost be impossible for one thing? And isn't it a little bit mission creep by the state to be interfering in the lives outside of educational settings? Are you comfortable with that scenario where we're constantly subjected to some kind of inspection in our private lives?
I don't think I've said anything that says this is about inspection in people's private lives. This is about having some handle on settings where we have seen that a very substantial proportion of the education that shapes children as adults in British society, that with no handle on that whatever, we are moving into an increasingly sort of segregated and difficult world.
Yes, so my final question is, define that setting then, because I'm very confused as to what you are arguing that setting is.
I've said that there are many after-school supplementary school settings exist, as well as the sort of full-time providers, and that to say because it is hard we shouldn't even attempt to do so, it seems to me to be sort of giving up before we begin. It's saying we should allow children to be harmed sooner than tackle a difficult problem of definition. I find that really difficult.
But you're not giving any answers as to how you would even begin to find out that definition. Under equality legislation as well, you have to be very broad.
I think that's a problem for the Department of Education. The draft legislation on the shelf was a first attempt. I know there were some people who thought it could be improved on. What I would like is to see the sort of kind of constructive conversation between all those concerned to get to working definitions that are good enough.
I think Michelle's wider point is we will need to make sure that the innocents are not swept away with the guilty.
And
we've got to be very clear.
As I have said very clearly, this should not be about simply a sort of universal heavy-handed blanket.
But under equality legislation, it's very hard to sort of define specific groups and organisations. Well,
in all the inspection work we do, we have a sort of significant sort of risk rating system, and each of our remits we risk adjust, and we risk assess and direct our inspection effort where we think there is most value to add.